is like a hot topic that's been coming up with a lot of the women reaching out to me is the whole topic of physical intimacy, the 3-letter word that starts with S. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it on here. I don't know if the algorithm's going to get me in trouble. So we'll just keep it at physical intimacy. You know what I mean by that. So I wanted to hop on here and talk about how most of the time, usually the issue in the relationship isn't actually or only about physical intimacy. We might see it that way. And I know a lot of the women coming to me recently, that's the number one thing that they pinpoint. But when we dig a lot deeper, we find that the issue is a lot broader than that, right? The physical intimacy is usually a symptom of something else that's going on in the relationship. And I find that so exciting to do the digging and really discovering what it is that's causing the issues in the relationship and that's leading to the lack of physical intimacy that becomes the symptom, that becomes a concern, and that has us feeling unfulfilled, right? So we're going to talk about that today. And if you're new to my world here, if you don't know me, my name is Mireille Thériault. I go by Mireille Nicole in my relationship coaching practice. I will skip the long intros today. If you don't know my story, I have plenty of videos on here that you can go back and kind of listen to see where I'm coming from in terms of my own experience and the lens through which I see relationships and relationship challenges and how I help other women overcome them. So we're going to talk today about physical intimacy. And I think the first thing I want to share and talk about is how physical intimacy is just so much more than what's happening in the bedroom, right? Physical intimacy also means just holding hands, touching, kissing, maybe sitting side by side, close to one another on the couch while you're watching a movie. It can be, just giving your partner a massage. And the big thing I want to share about intimacy also, when we talk about intimacy, a lot of times the word is interchanged or replaced for physical intimacy. Sometimes when we hear intimacy, right away, we just think of physical intimacy in the bedroom, but intimacy is actually a much broader topic. It has a lot more layers to it and a lot more diversity. So I like to coach women in my programs and whatnot. I talk about up to 7 or 8 different types of intimacy. And if you Google this, different people will come up with a different number in terms of the types of intimacy that are out there or that exist, right, in a relationship. But and some of my favorites, just to give you an idea, obviously there's physical intimacy that we all know, but there's obviously also emotional intimacy, right? And emotional intimacy is your ability as a couple to share how you're feeling, what your emotions, what you're going through, right? What's going on inside of you and the depths of you. And then there's intellectual intimacy. And this is your ability to have conversations about more serious topics or more nerdy topics, what's going on in the world, politics, just opinions, what's going on the news, right? That's going to be your intellectual intimacy. There's also recreational intimacy, which is a big one. It's a big one, ladies, because guys, men, right, they like to bond over having fun. So the more recreational intimacy that you have, the stronger your relationship's going to be. And this is, this can be having hobbies together, doing sports together, going to events together, even just, any kind of activity that you do to have fun is going to be your recreational intimacy. And this is something, that happens a lot in the beginning of the relationships. It's new in the relationship. You guys go out and do a lot of things. And then maybe, life starts happening. Maybe you have a family. It's harder to kind of do these activities. So I just want to really point that one out because it's going to be a big one in terms of having a broad, holistic view of intimacy in your relationship. You're going to want to touch on these different types of intimacy to really create that fulfilling bond as a couple. So other types of intimacy is experiential intimacy. And this is really having experiences together. For example, it can be things like coincidences or sunsets or natural wonders, just something that makes you guys like in awe of something and just experiencing something spectacular together, some sort of, like a natural wonder or something, or even like coincidences. I know my husband and I, a lot of times we love to experience these coincidences. And sometimes you have to be just kind of aware of these things and you notice them more. I talk a lot about, we feel we're really lucky a lot of times, right? We'll just go somewhere where you need a reservation and they always find us a spot. Or we'll go somewhere and we'll just find the best parking spot, right? And acknowledging these things together and experiencing them is going to create kind of that bond and that intimacy at that level. So what are other ones? Oh, a big one, financial intimacy, right? This is a big one in relationships. Money can be a cause of a lot of friction. So the more that you guys can really connect in understanding what money means to you and what the value of it is for each and every one of you, you create that type of also financial intimacy. And the goal here is that the more you can have these different types of intimacies fulfilled, the more overall you're going to feel satisfied and content, right? So this is something that we were talking about, me and my client, where she realized and she had this aha moment where she was really fixated and focused on the physical intimacy or the lack thereof in her relationship because she was feeling, and she put it this way, right, depleted in other areas of her life. So when we started doing the work together, one of the first things we started doing was really thinking and reflecting back in terms of what really was going on here. And what we discovered was that what she was really craving beyond the whole physical intimacy was to really have more open communication with her husband and also to feel a more deeper emotional and mental intimacy and connection and bond with him also. So there was the whole communication aspect, and just building off of that, right, too, was the whole idea of having more of an emotional connection with him. And when we started doing the work, and we've only been doing the work a couple of weeks now, really focused on the whole aspect of communication and feeling those emotional needs, she noticed not only a shift in her husband, but also a shift in her cravings and her need for physical intimacy and what she was making it mean about her and the relationship when there was no intimacy, right? Because she wasn't getting anything fulfilled at those other levels she was desiring. She was hoping to make up for it in the area of physical intimacy, and that wasn't always happening. But when we started taking things beyond what was going on, or not going on in the bedroom and started focusing on these other areas, she shared today, we were celebrating her wins like we always do at the beginning of our calls, all the calls with my ladies, and she was sharing how over the weekend, her husband had actually initiated like a long 2-hour conversation where he was sharing things that he wasn't normally sharing, and she could feel a real shift in him. And this actually continued on over the next few days. So she started experiencing that open communication that is really what she was truly desiring. And the fact that he was sharing his feelings with her, she was starting to feel that emotional bond with him, right? The other aspect that she was desiring. She was also sharing that based on some of the tools and the techniques we had talked about, she was getting more affection from him. So even though things were still working on the whole physical intimacy, maybe in the bedroom part of it, she started noticing a lot more affection from him, and a lot more affection that felt genuine, right? Not forced affection where it's obvious that your husband or your man is just trying to calm you down, or like you get him off his back. Did I say that right? You know what I mean. So she was noticing a lot more of that, which got her really excited too, right? So even just having more of that physical touch, physical affection, right, without necessarily going straight into the intimacy, was really fulfilling her needs and really filling up her cup. And the third example I wanted to share also was that he started asking her there was a moment where she recalled where he asked her what she needed, how he could support her. And she was saying, that's like the first time in 13 years of being together that I can remember him actually saying, hey, what do you need from me? How can I support you? And again, this was all contributing to her getting those needs filled, that she was really pinpointing in that box of, okay, we need to have more physical intimacy more regularly, more often. This was starting to really fulfill her a lot more and reducing that urgency and that fixation, right? Having a holistic view of the health of the relationship and not pinpointing on that particular issue. Because most of the time, those issues that you pinpoint are part of a larger systemic problem. So when we start addressing that at a higher level, we start seeing those symptoms starting to gradually disappear. And like I said, this is just a couple of weeks, so things can happen pretty fast. So I also can really relate to this. I shared a post on this not too long ago where I was sharing that when things were sideways in my relationship with my then boyfriend, now husband, I was in a similar situation where if we weren't making love, I didn't feel loved. And it was for this exact same reason. So I can completely relate to that client of mine and what she went through, because it's the same thing. When I started looking at the relationship at a more the ecosystem of the relationship and addressing it at that higher level, that's when things started shifting. And I was starting to get, satisfied in more areas, because when things were difficult, we weren't having as much recreational intimacy like I was talking about. We weren't doing as many of the activities that we like like doing together. We had a harder time communicating. And again, in that moment, I just didn't have the tools that I have now. So the only thing that could make me feel secure in the relationship was to have that physical intimacy, right? But now that I understand this and I have the tools, it just shifted everything around. And I'm not saying that there's no value in addressing the physical intimacy per se. There definitely is. However, it's always going to be beyond that. So you want to look at the whole big picture, because most of the time there's nothing that you're going to be able to do in the bedroom that's going to make up for those larger issues of maybe it's communication, like my client and like what I experienced too, or kind of the emotional connection that might not be there that you desire. So I invite you to look at that. I hope this really lands with you, resonates with you. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I did prepare an ebook. I have an ebook available to you if you want to download it. That's really going to help you look at these different types of intimacy and rate where you're at in your own relationship so that you can see how to address them or what to start focusing on to really recalibrate all those different levels of intimacy in your relationship. And if you want any support with that, you know where to find me. Reach out to me in the DMs and we will get you started on turning this around.